Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
Hello and welcome to the Popternative podcast, the podcast and talk show where we have digital discussions from the worlds of social media, TV, film, pop culture, sports, news, lifestyle, everything really, depending on the guest. Talk about it all. As always, I'm your host, Peter Remoliotis. On social media, you know me as PD Beats. My guest is an entrepreneur. He is the managing partner and founder of Ventana Ventures. He also hosts his own podcast called Startup to Storefront. We're with Diego Torres-Palma. Diego, welcome to Popternative, man.
Thanks for having me, brother. Glad to be here. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. I mean, I feel like there's a lot kind of to talk about. I mean, kind of answer two questions at once a little bit. Talk a little bit about kind of when you decided that entrepreneurship was something you wanted to do, and then rope it in a little bit with how you wanted to decide to start a podcast.
Yeah, I think two moments. I think the first thing is I went to school for civil engineering, and the only reason I did that was because I had an uncle once tell me, "Hey, if you go to school for civil engineering, you'll make some pretty good money." Mm-hmm. And so I fell right into that narrative, and I thought, okay, cool, let me go to school, and I was pretty good at math. And then coming out of it, I was kind of like, I was on the same mindset I think we all fall into, which is like, we want to make the six figures. Mm-hmm. And I quickly realized like I had a great job. I had a great mentor. My boss was amazing, great company. And I just wasn't happy because nothing was moving at my pace. I wasn't learning as much anymore. I wasn't doing the things I wanted to do. And so in some way I kind of felt held back. And I realized if I really wanted to grow or scale or learn about different things besides civil engineering, which is great, but it's just one small silo of the world, then I have to go into entrepreneurship. And so that was one thing. And then I can't remember when exactly this happened, but I got fired one time, I think from my second job or something like that. And that was like the ultimate for me. It was like, oh, but when I got fired, it wasn't like I was upset. I was like, yeah, this person doesn't get what I'm trying to achieve. So I need to go into the world and create those things. And so I think one, just wanting to be uncapped. And then two, sometimes life will push you in a certain direction. And with the podcast, really what we're trying to do there is just inspire entrepreneurship through truth. And so we have a lot of founders on, we've had some celebrities on, and what we talk about is the hardships of being a founder. And so when you're going into that thing, it's never easy. Fundraising is not easy. Having money saved up or going into debt, however you decide to do it, none of these things are easy. Mm-hmm. Obviously, dealing with COVID, we've been talking about that and how companies are doing. For sure. None of this is easy. And so the whole point of the podcast is just to inspire entrepreneurship through truth. And we dig into that. We dig into all the hard parts. Even the psychological stuff like imposter syndrome and all sorts of that stuff.
No, absolutely. Yeah. It's funny because I feel like it's a full circle moment for the show right now, because people that have we've done this show for 5 years. And when I first started this show, it was kind of like, I did it after I finished my master's in communications and I was really into sports and social media. So I decided I wanted to kind of do a podcast. And when it started, it was kind of like, you were the type, like, we still have, entrepreneurs and marketers on the show, but like not as much as we used to. But when we first started it, like you would have probably been like the perfect guest for like when we first started. Because it was like me shooting the breeze with three other people who did marketing for like Adidas or like Foot Locker, you know what I mean? So yeah, no, definitely interesting there. I think a lot of people in terms of like entrepreneurship and starting their own company, I mean, I think the challenge is always finding out what works and how are you going to kind of make sure it continues to kind of work for your business. You know what I mean? For you specifically, what are some things just on top of your head when I say that, like do what works for you as a business? What are some kind of advice that you have for other entrepreneurs in regards to making sure they stick to what they believe will work as a business and not kind of get sidetracked?
I think one of the things that I've found work for me is at some point you need to realize everything that exists today has been structured and basically exists because somebody decided to take a decision to do that thing. And now we know it as normal. Mm-hmm. And so the way I kind of view entrepreneurship is we all view the world in our own way. And entrepreneurship is your only way of letting the world know what you think.
Yep.
Really, right? And so whether it's through a product, even if the product already exists, but you're just putting your own spin on it, I really think that's it for me. It's just we all have our opinions of how things should go, of how disruption should work. We all have our qualms with like, oh, if Facebook only did this or Instagram only did that. And then it's like, we have the ability to be critics, but also be creators. And so I always kind of take that approach of like, if you're willing to criticize it, then maybe that's a business.
Yeah, no, that's interesting for sure. Have you also noticed too that, because obviously entrepreneurs, whether they're doing it, like whether you're actually going on doing it or whether, you hire someone or you have someone, I mean, marketing is obviously one of the most important things about, a business, you know what I mean? You have a product, you want to get the product out there. What have you noticed in terms of the evolution of digital media marketing, social media marketing? I feel like it's interesting because social media marketing and digital media marketing, I feel like we're kept separate at one point. Like digital media marketing was more about the e-marketing and the news blast, like email blasts and all that. But then you also had like social media, which there was a little bit of like a stigma to it. Like, oh, you're just tweeting from a phone. You know what I mean? You're not really marketing that much. Where are we right now with digital marketing and social media marketing, Diego?
I'll kind of share the story with you. So my first company was a bow tie company. And at the time, this is probably 2010. And so Facebook was all the rage. And Twitter was kind of hot. Instagram didn't exist yet. And so as an entrepreneur, I always use social media as an easy way to get access to a lot of people because the people at Twitter had done such a good job basically building an audience for me as an entrepreneur is how I viewed it. And at the time, up until probably the latest election, we had the ability on Facebook where I could literally take an ad and target you, like you specifically. And so if I'm selling a bow tie, then it's really straightforward. It's like people who live in DC that make this much money, are into these books. And the better I got at understanding the things that made my target consumer buy or purchase, that was really helpful for me. And so I really use these tools. And I've always viewed social media like this. All they are simple audiences that people have spent a tremendous amount of time and energy building so that these audiences stay here, almost like stadiums. And they just happen to be called Facebook and Twitter, now Instagram in our lifetime. That's how I've always viewed social media. And because of that, I've never had this like I never liked it. I don't like being on, I don't like looking at pictures. I'm not interested. My brain just goes, how can I get my podcast out there? How can I get my brand out there? And so then Instagram comes out and it's like, oh, this is interesting. Okay, cool. Similar concept, except now we got pictures. So it's like pictures meets Twitter kind of a thing. Yeah. And you could put like nice filters on it and blah, blah, blah. And so the question I always have, even when I think about the App Store with Apple, how will brands interact? Because we all knew the App Store would be games and shortcuts to like an app that I would use on my computer. But no one really knew, like, how is a brand going to sell me a product without being salesy, but give me an experience via an app? It's actually a question that a lot of people had. And so on Instagram, it was the same thing. And I think what Instagram has, the brands that I've talked to on the podcast that have done this well, it's just leaned so heavily on education. They just use Instagram as a way. It can't be, it can't be like a beautiful model rocking your shirt. That can work some of the time, but you got to have some substance behind it. But I think the reality of business today, and I think, and this, it might seem shocking, but the business today requires you to be excellent at your product and excellent with media. You basically have to be a media company today. Yeah. And so I'll give you an example. If you're an almond milk company, you better be telling the world why your almond milk lacks certain chemicals because those chemicals are bad. So now what you're really doing is that you're in the business of educating, but you just happen to have a product that solves the problem you're illustrating. You can only do those things when you have one, a great product, and two, an understanding of social media and digital media. And these things need to exist together. So you have to put it together with your Instagram, with your email campaign that you alluded to, and it has to work. But what you're really doing is feeding education instead of sales. Yeah. And so that's kind of how I view it. Yeah.
That's interesting. No, for sure. Do you also kind of notice that, the evolving, the like evolution of certain things is really interesting? Where like Instagram, right, what is supposed to be like on your phone and everything, but now there's a lot of people that are using like you mentioned, Instagram with like the Twitter for photos. You can make it look nice and everything. But a lot of people use Instagram, and I'm sure you know about this because of like who you talk to and everything. But a lot of people, like, it's used almost like direct messages are used like emails sometimes. Like people kind of have their people have their desktop open and like go through like their messages like like an email. Have you
I'm
noticed
so
that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said this. So I used to run sales teams. This is to give you context, like 2015, so
Yeah.
5 years ago. And I would basically be like, guys, I don't want you emailing any of our customers or clients. We need to get on a texting basis with them. And people thought I was crazy. Like people were like, oh, but Diego, like it's a professional relationship. I only text my friends, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, these people have given you money, which is more than your friends have given you. So they're basically your friends. And if you really want to get their attention and you're really trying to help them, like text them. And, it eventually got around. And so today I kind of view, like I viewed email then as the fax machine. I think today, to your point exactly, I do so much business via Instagram DM. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's also an opportunity for me to, I have a small following. I have 15,000 followers, but it's also an opportunity for me when I create things, people they're like, oh, this is great. Or like, oh, this is amazing. This is one of my favorite people. I'm so glad you interviewed this person. And they ask me questions. And so it's an ability for me to kind of be human with them. Mm-hmm. And so, right. And I think all of these things work together, but yeah, I think Instagram DM is kind of like the new texting. Texting is the email. And then I don't know, emails are, I guess, just for the older demographic at this point.
Return of investment. ROI. Obviously has to do with, we're talking the financial ROI and everything. People invest in certain things, and the reason they invest is because they believe there's going to be a return of their investment. People create podcasts and want to get a lot of numbers so that they can get sponsorships. Companies, want to get investors and sponsorships to grow their business, but the people that put in the money want, the return of investment. What is in it for them? We're talking about financial now. Non-financial return investment, whether that exists or not. You know what I mean? Like a guy like you.
It exists.
Well, say that. What are some things that companies should look for if someone's trying to invest in a podcast or in a company? Not looking because people are like, oh, social media, you know what I mean? Big deal. You have 25,000 followers. Why should I invest in you? You know what I mean? Besides getting their money back or making money, are there other things that they should be looking into in terms of ROI, like non-financial ROI?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll tell you why I started the podcast. And so for me, with the podcast, like we get the question all the time, like, how are you going to monetize? And I'm like, you're starting with the wrong, people that have asked me this question. I'm like, that's not why we started the podcast. And so think about me. I'm a real estate developer. We have a different approach where we're always trying to find the tenant first. And so most commercial real estate is you buy the building, you put a for lease sign, and then you hope. We kind of we do it the other way. We say, let's start with really cool business operators that are already bringing a really cool product with great ethos, and let's help them find a location by being a tenant-friendly landlord that understands the development process. And so in taking that approach, if you think about it, what my job is to find founders, right? What better way to find founders than to bring them on the podcast and have a therapy session with me, right? So that's step one. So my ROI is I get to meet amazing people, but oddly enough, we're building a coffee shop and it's from somebody that came on the podcast because I thought they were amazing. And now they're like, yeah, we want to partner with you. Let's go ahead and do this. And so we're working with them. And so that to me is ROI. Now here's the second ROI. We also have a producer, we have an editor on our show, and we have a social media team. And so I say, look, guys, I pay them, right? So we pay them money. And I say, you guys at the end of the day want to grow your businesses. The best way to grow your businesses is to crush social media by creating all this cool content from our episode and then tagging. And then if the brands say, oh, wow, you're doing it way better than our social media team, can we hire you? That's a win. And that's happened. And so they've monetized by doing what they love to do, right? And showing up and doing a great job. And so they've monetized legitimately real ROI, even though they're kind of employees of the podcast. And so, I think we're all monetizing differently. And we get, look, I'll be honest with you too. We get emails being like, hey, I want to advertise on your podcast. And for us, it's kind of like, we'll do it, but it has to really fit in with the entrepreneurship community. It can't be like, oh, here's a mattress, right? It's got to be like, how does this company help startup and something that could be of value?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's amazing. And I think I wish people would I hope people listen to this, what you just said, and listen to interviews like this, because I find that like what you kind of talked about, Diego, is like the long-term goal, the long-term effects. People are just like, pay me now. I want it now. I want my cake now. You know what I mean? Like, people don't realize though that it's going to be it could be a lot better and luxurious for you if you kind of go with approaches like that as well.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like I've made the mistake of thinking too short-term, of selling too early. Like I've made that mistake. And so for me, it's like, I take a different approach. And the way I really think about this is, I hate using the word like vertical integration because it sounds so specialized and like MBA business schooly. But basically, all I'm really doing is saying, I'm a real estate developer. I need to find founders. What's the best way to find founders? Let's do a podcast. While we're doing the podcast, we can also share these stories and hopefully, hopefully people listen. I don't know if they will. I think they will. I think we have engaging conversations, but I'm not, I'm just one person. You don't know until you put it out there. But altogether, that thing, really, and it ends up taking on a life of its own, which is really cool. But we've invested in companies that have come on the podcast personally, and then the coffee shop story. And so the way I look at it is like the ROI is there. It doesn't smell like money, but it's a different kind of ROI.
That was I like threw you like a fastball down the middle, and I feel like you just kind of like hit it out of the park like right away. So like that was
a good question. That's a good question.
No, it's interesting for sure. No, the landscape's interesting. Diego, thank you so much for coming on to chat a little bit, man. I really enjoyed this.
You bet, brother. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
No, yeah, absolutely. So, plug away. I mean, talk a little bit about just like plug.
Yeah.
We, founders, entrepreneurs, we plug. That's like what we do, right?
Yeah, check out the podcast. It's called Startup to Storefront. It's literally telling the story of how companies go from zero all the way to a storefront, in some cases all the way to exits. Yep. We just released a new segment called the Launchpad, which is when we try to feature brand new companies. Just because, brand new companies are dealing with something completely different. And some of those fears are what hold a lot of the entrepreneurship community back. And so we talk about that. And then I'm just at Diego Ventures. My Instagram is full of tennis, real estate development, and then some cool things I do around podcasting.
Amazing. Well, seriously, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really enjoyed this chat.
You bet, brother. Thank you very much.
No problem. This has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. And until next time, this is Diego Torres-Palma and PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.